I'm thinking about changing my parting message, because the books I want to recommend aren't particularly enjoyable. They don't feature wizards vanquishing dark forces in the end, or enemies becoming friends. They are books about struggle and strife, sometimes unimaginable sorrow. They are books about people who hide in plain sight and spend their whole adult lives overcoming oppressive governments. Books about violence, discrimination, and places that are polluted almost beyond healing. Books that are written by people who have held extraordinary power but have committed unspeakable acts against humanity. Books written by people who are highly opinionated. Now you're probably wondering why a friendly librarian like me wants to make people squirm. Aren't librarians a social good? Aren't we supposed to make people feel better? Well, there is certainly a place for healing through reading, and I do recommend books that are pleasurable and enjoyable, at least in the end. But lately, my preference has been for uncomfortable reading. Let me tell you why. We live in a world that is more interconnected than ever, and yet studies show that we tend to read only what is familiar to us, and that which conforms to our existing political inclinations and social biases. This phenomenon is called confirmation bias and is evident in the other media we consume as well. A study from the Pew Research Center called Political Polarization and Media Habits suggests that people who identify as consistently conservative get all of their news from Fox. People who identify themselves as consistently liberal tend to defriend or block people on Facebook who hold differing political views. Now, digging into the gray matter of our brains, the New Scientist journal recently reported on a study from neuroscientist Michael Frank. Frank looks at how the brain chemical dopamine affects our consumption of either familiar or disruptive information. He found that dopamine comforts us when our brain is presented with familiar information and stimulates us when we're presented with the unfamiliar. For most of us, soothing comfort generally wins out over the discordant clang of the new. So we continue to read comfortably. However, he also found that some people prefer the unfamiliar and thrive on this sort of information. Now, I don't know if we can open up our minds to the novel, but I do think the act of trying to overcome our bias for uncomfortable reading is worth the effort. I know when I was in high school, an uncomfortable book was life-changing. I went to high school a long time ago, 40 years to be exact, in a predominantly white suburb of Los Angeles. But I still remember the day my librarian handed me the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley. I still remember the day I cracked open this thick book and read about the civil rights perspective from the fiery Malcolm X. Page 381. When the assassination in Dallas made Johnson president, who was the first person he called for? It was for his best friend, Dickie, Richard Russell of Georgia. Civil rights was a moral issue, Johnson was declaring to everybody, while his best friend was the Southern racist who led the civil rights opposition. How would some sheriff sound declaring himself so against bank robbery and Jesse James, his best friend. Now, this was a very different narrative than my textbook history of civil rights, which was very tame. Because of this book, I began to question my education. I began to take charge of my education. I began to read the newspaper and listen to the news. No internet back in my day. I began to form my own political beliefs apart from my parents and my friends. Thinking about it now, it was sort of like the launching of a boat. Before Malcolm and Alex's fiery words, I was at home in my cozy vessel tied to my sunny dock. But Malcolm and Alex's confrontational and controversial language untethered my mind, launching me into our fascinating, yet wholly imperfect world. That's essentially what a comfortable reading is all about, putting ourselves out into the larger world. Past, present, and yes, even future, in order to develop empathy and understanding for others. In fact, a recent Harvard study suggests that people who read compelling fiction develop regions in their brain that activate social cognition. Uncomfortable reading is difficult. It is sad, demoralizing, and tough. But perhaps at the end of the story, you might find there's a biological dopamine rush that incites a new idea or insight. So take it from someone who is still learning in high school. Engage your adversaries by reading their words. What do they have to say? Why are they saying what they're saying? Do not isolate your mind and your heart in only comfortable places where they are. Read to become global citizens. We are all